Yeah, it's just an old tested command that wasn't removed properly. Yeah. So funny that these things are. It's that these types of things are remaining in this game is what makes this game so unique. There's not many games out there that have these types of Easter eggs. Hey, Super Pichu, thanks for the follow. Then people started using it as a feature, so now we can't remove it without giving a proper alternative. Yeah. Isn't that how it goes with everything like that? Yeah. Because if you removed it, people would just cry. Nerf, you just nerfed this system that was so useful. Why would you ever nerf that? And what would the proper alternative be to this? Currently, what it is it's something for nothing. You get this thing, this marker, for nothing. No investment. You can do it infinitely many times, which I feel is a little bit much. But at the same time, yeah, how much effort do you want to put into making a replacement for that and a whole system surrounding it? And you're still going to get everybody to cry out that it's been nerfed. Yeah, I can see why you just keep it there. I can see it. Fountain pans. Oh, good old fountain pans. Those are gone now, eh? Like, the black hole took them from everybody. Is that right? I really truly wonder how many fountain pans there were out there. How many were actually in use? Very curious to know. I do know that there were people who were cranking them out like mad at some point. What is a fountain pan? Whoa, don't get me started. Wow, I can talk about this forever. Fountain pans are an age-old relic. There used to be a bug. Oh my goodness, I have to go back even farther than that. It used to be that whenever you created an item, it always came out unfinished. Okay, so you got to understand that first. Right? Because nowadays, if I take a pickaxe head and a shaft and I put it together and I'm successful, it's a pickaxe. But it didn't used to be like that. You would put it together and it would be an unfinished pickaxe, but you can imp it. And you would have to imp it a few times, depending on your skill. So if you're really low, you'd have to imp it a lot before it became a pickaxe. Okay. So I'm just going to throw out a scenario here. Oh, the other thing is that the unfinished versions of the item had a different kind of like volume to them. Like you could take 100 of these unfinished pickaxes and put them in a satchel or something like that. Like they didn't have that much volume. But like once they got finished, then they acted like the normal pickaxe. But like before, they were just unfinished, and you could just put like a ton of them into like a container. So somebody figured out that, for example, I'll use the pickaxe again, that you could take an unfinished pickaxe and let's say put it in like a tiny container, like a satchel that it wouldn't normally fit in. And then while it was in there, if you imped it in it finished, it stayed in there. So you now have a satchel with a pickaxe in it, right? I mean, of course, you could take the pickaxe out, but then it wouldn't go back into the satchel. But like for the time being, you now have a satchel with a pickaxe in it. Now, that's not really that big of a deal, a satchel with a pickaxe in it. But people started figuring out that, and you could probably you think through all the items in the game, and every single one had this characteristic that you'd make it, but it would be unfinished, and then you could put it into a tiny little container and then finish it while it was in there. So what people did was they would take very large items such as fountains and put them into really small containers like pans, and then they would finish them inside the pan, and now you have a frying pan or a saucepan or something like that with a finished fountain in it. And that fountain you can now put like backpacks in that fountain. Like the fountain has all the regular properties of a fountain and all the regular like volume of a fountain. So you can put backpacks in there. You can put large items in there, and they're all in a little saucepan. And that saucepan could fit. And here's where it became like really, really bad. The saucepan would fit into a tiny little magic chest. A small magic chest. So you would get a small magic chest and put a few of these saucepans in it that each have fountains inside of those, that each have like 10 backpacks that contain like a ton of stuff. So people use these as an exploit of a way of fitting pretty much unlimited amount of stuff into a small magic chest. Yeah. Now these items, like once people figured this out, it was just like people were making them like crazy. They just made tons and tons of these things, and they would sell them like for not very much money. It would be sold like a job, like, you know, however much effort it took to make. And then a change happened in the game that made it so that items no longer come out unfinished. No, this is wrong. I'm saying it wrong. Something happened before that. There was a change that made it so that you could no longer do this with fountains or something. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but there was a period of time where you still could make unfinished items, but you could no longer make fountain pans. Like fountain pans were no longer being made. And by the time that I started playing, or it might have been just after I started playing, I was still a noob, and they made this change. So when I started playing or started figuring this out, we couldn't make fountain pans anymore. However, you could still do the pickaxe thing and put it in a satchel and finish pickaxes. Other things that you could do that were weird was that you could let's say make a whole bunch of unfinished backpacks and then put them all into another backpack and then finish them in there. So you would have like one backpack that had tons of backpacks in it. You could still do that. But you couldn't make fountain pans. So because you couldn't make fountain pans, they became very valuable. People sold these things for tons of money. You can't finish sized items in a small, like a boat and cart. Yeah, that can't happen anymore. They fixed that. But yeah, there was some limitations to it for sure. Like there were certain, so at some before when you could make fountain pans, there was like no limitations. Like anything, you could build anything inside anything. So they fixed that, so you couldn't do that anymore. So it almost had, it was like the unfinished item. Like a backpack, for example, an unfinished backpack wouldn't fit into a satchel anymore or something like that. Like there was a change made. But you could still take an unfinished backpack and put it into a backpack and finish it. So I started doing this. Like, and at the time, like it was common practice. Like it was a well-known... I guess it was a bug. It was a bug. Let's call it what it was. It was a bug. But at the time, it was well in the open. Everybody talked about them. Everybody knew they existed. It wasn't like a secret or anything. And the devs knew that everybody knew that this was going on, and people were just making these items, and nobody was saying it, don't make them. None of the message from the devs wasn't that it's an exploit or anything like that. Everybody felt like it was like a feature of the game. And, people claim even that the devs went so far as to say that these will never be taken out of the game, although there's no evidence to support that. Whether the evidence was never there or whether it was erased from history, people claim that the devs indicated that these items are okay and that they'll just stay in the game, and you can't make them anymore anyway, so whatever's in the game is going to stay there. Again, this is what people claimed was said. I don't remember that. But again, I was a noob at the time, so I wasn't really looking at this stuff. So yeah, it was basically a bug that became a feature, but then at some point later, all of this was squashed and all the unfinished items were taken out of the game. And then the devs started thinking, okay, well, we want to start adding new things to the game. We want to add new things to the game. Like one example, here's one. It's like I'm trying to think. This whole thing is like so complicated. One thing that people use fountain pans for, aside from storing an enormous amount of things, one other thing that they did, oops, I'm using the wrong tool, is that they would use it to paint really large items like boats, because boats took so much dye. And at the time, there was no such container in the game that would allow you to hold enough dye to paint a boat. So what people would do is they would make a fountain pan, because fountain pans fit into your inventory. Because the only thing that needed to fit into your inventory was the pan. Like, you couldn't pick up a fountain and bring it into your inventory. That was impossible. But you could put a pan in your inventory and then have a fountain inside of that pan and put enough dye into the fountain to allow you to activate the dye and then paint the boat. So back then, that was the only way to paint boats. There was no other way. And those people who had painted boats were held in high esteem because they had to have a fountain pan in order to paint their boat. So there came a point where the devs were like, okay, we want to start adding these items, like something that would hold enough liquid that you can hold into your inventory so you can paint boats and other things like that. But and then there were other things, like they wanted to add more storage solutions. They wanted to add a whole bunch of these items, but they felt, I guess, and this is my guess, I'm totally speculating here. My guess is that they felt that the fountain pans undermined all of these extra features that they're going to add, because, and also that the fountain pan was made because of a bug, and it kind of is on that borderline of an exploit, and and they wanted the development of the game to go in that direction where things get smoothed out and these sorts of things get fixed and stuff. And so they got to the point where they made this big announcement. You could probably find it in the forum somewhere, that we acknowledge that you guys have fountain pans, but we're going to be removing them from the game. So they turned all of the fountain pen items into, what were they called? They were called something like wormholes or something like that, which gave you the sense that they, like the wormholes, they can hold infinitely many items or something like that. And then, but they had a timer on them, and the timer was set for 1 year. After that 1 year, they would be poofed out of existence and they would be just completely destroyed forever. So people were outraged, obviously. I can only imagine those people who just bought their first fountain pen ever just before they made that announcement, and they probably would have spent like 100 silver on it or something like that. Saved up all their money, bought a fountain pen. Yes, I finally can paint my boat. Yes, I can finally store my items. And then the devs go and announce, we're going to add a new item that can allow you to paint your boat. And we're going to add new items that can allow you to store amazing amounts of stuff. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be getting rid of all the fountain pens in the game. I could have just imagined the outrage. But yeah, I never bought a fountain pen. I had the thought of doing it once. I knew people who had them, but I never bought one myself. All right, let's see here. What are people saying? You can no longer finish items inside something they shouldn't fit in. Yeah. Can't finish size items in an item too small, like both. Yeah. Once they factor in weight for unfinished items, then it changed. Yeah. I still have an unfinished item. Unfinished slate slab. Examine does nothing. Can't do anything with it. Yep. I think I have an unfinished slate slab. You know, the unfinished slate slab is slightly different because slate slabs were items that, like the way that you would make slate floors before, where that you had to create slate slabs and they required like a crazy amount of slate. I think each slab required something silly like, I can't remember, was it like 40 bricks or something like that? But that was well after the unfinished item bit, right? Like there's a difference between an unfinished item that you're making, like an unfinished cart, or an unfinished, like, you know, your items that you have to add to, like boats, unfinished boats, for example. Like you can still make an unfinished boat, but you can no longer make an unfinished backpack, or an unfinished satchel, or an unfinished pickaxe, or an unfinished... There's lots of things that you cannot make unfinished items anymore. But there was a time, way back in the day, where every single item in the game had an unfinished version of it. And when you bring the item into existence, it is first an unfinished item. And that happened for every item. So I do have a couple unfinished items from that day that are like that. Like, I do have an unfinished backpack somewhere. I actually probably have a bunch of them. But I have a feeling that you can't finish them anymore inside something that they shouldn't fit in, like Buddha's saying. So I just have them as sort of relics. Yeah, slate slabs used to take concrete. Those were, you know, and on Winter's Night, I made a 22 tile building where the entire first floor was slate. The entire first floor. So 22 tiles, and each tile took 2 slabs plus 10, was it mortar? Yeah, 2 slabs plus 10 mortar. And each slab took like 40 something bricks or something. And 4 concrete, I think it was. It was a job and a half to get that slate floor in. And then maybe it was a year or 2 later, they changed it to be the way it is now. And now you can make slate slabs just as easily as any other floor. Yeah. Give them a year. Yeah. They could have just deleted it. It is true. They could have just deleted it. True. They were thinking though of those people who had just bought them. That's really, I think, who it was for, right? Because you just spent 100 silver on an item that they were about to take away, and they just take it away from you. I can't imagine that you'd be that happy about it. Probably to the point where you would quit the game and be severely bitter. So people still quit the game and were severely bitter, even though there was a year given. But, I think the game is better now for it. I really do think that the game is better now for it. Yeah, okay, maybe they didn't cost 100 silver. Yeah, I'm just making up a number. It was enough money, though. I don't know about 20, though. I think 20 is lower than... We'll have to look at some old posts, but...